In 2017, FBI agent Lisa Chen stared at the computer screen in disbelief. The man sitting across from her in the federal interrogation room had just confessed to a cybercrime that seemed routine until he mentioned something that made her blood run cold. "There was this doctor in Colorado," Marcus Webb said casually, his handcuffs clinking against the metal table. "Guy disappeared back in 2001. I know what happened to him." What Webb revealed next would finally solve one of Colorado's most haunting missing person cases and expose a web of corporate greed that had claimed an innocent life 16 years earlier. Dr. Jonathan Mitchell had been living what most would consider a perfect life in the summer of 2001. At 42, he was the newly appointed chief of cardiology at Denver General Hospital, a position he had worked toward his entire career. His groundbreaking research on heart disease prevention was gaining national attention, and pharmaceutical companies were beginning to take notice of his innovative approaches to cardiac rehabilitation. Jonathan lived in a comfortable suburban home with his wife Sarah, a dedicated nurse at the same hospital, and their 8-year-old twin daughters, Emma and Sophie. The Mitchell family embodied the American dream. Jonathan had grown up in a working-class family in Ohio, the son of a factory worker and a school secretary. His parents had sacrificed everything to put him through medical school, and he never forgot their dedication. He carried their values of hard work and integrity into his medical practice, earning the respect of colleagues and patients alike. Sarah often joked that she had married the most ethical man she knew, someone who would never compromise his principles for personal gain. On the morning of July 15, 2001, Jonathan kissed his family goodbye as he prepared to leave for the annual Colorado Medical Association conference in Aspen. The 3-hour drive through the Rocky Mountains was one he had made many times before. But this year felt different. He was scheduled to present his latest research on a revolutionary treatment protocol that could potentially save thousands of lives and change the landscape of cardiac care forever. Sarah noticed that her husband seemed unusually quiet that morning as he loaded his presentation materials into their silver Honda Accord. When she asked if everything was okay, Jonathan smiled and assured her he was just nervous about his presentation. He had been working on this research for over 2 years, and the results were promising enough to attract attention from major pharmaceutical companies. What Sarah didn't know was that Jonathan had been receiving strange phone calls at his office for the past month, calls that left him increasingly uncomfortable. The drive from Denver to Aspen took Jonathan through some of Colorado's most breathtaking scenery. Highway 82 wound through mountain passes, alongside rushing rivers, and past towering peaks that drew tourists from around the world. Jonathan had always found the drive relaxing, a chance to clear his mind and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. But on this particular morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. About 2 hours into his journey, as he passed through the resort town of Glenwood Springs, Jonathan's cell phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something compelled him to answer. The voice on the other end was professional and urgent, claiming to be Dr. Richard Hawthorne from Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, a company based in Boulder. Hawthorne explained that he had been following Jonathan's research and needed to discuss an urgent matter that could affect both their careers. Dr. Hawthorne suggested they meet at a rest area just outside Glenwood Springs, claiming he was already in the area and that the matter was too sensitive to discuss over the phone. Jonathan was hesitant, knowing he needed to reach Aspen in time for the conference registration, but Hawthorne's insistence and apparent knowledge of his research convinced him to agree to the meeting. It was a decision that would cost him his life. When Jonathan failed to arrive at the conference that evening, his colleagues initially assumed he had been delayed by car trouble or bad weather. Dr. Patricia Wells, the conference coordinator and Jonathan's longtime friend, tried calling his cell phone repeatedly but received no answer. By Saturday morning, when Jonathan missed his scheduled presentation, Dr. Wells became genuinely concerned and called Sarah in Denver. Sarah's initial reaction was confusion rather than panic. Jonathan was meticulous about his schedule and would never miss an important presentation without calling. She tried his cell phone herself, hearing only his voicemail greeting played back repeatedly. As the hours passed without any word from her husband, Sarah's concern grew into full-blown panic. By Sunday morning, she was calling every hospital between Denver and Aspen, desperate for any information about her husband's whereabouts. The missing person report filed by Sarah on Sunday afternoon triggered an immediate response from the Colorado State Patrol. Jonathan's disappearance was particularly concerning because of the treacherous mountain roads between Denver and Aspen. Every year, drivers were injured or killed when their vehicles left the winding highways and plunged into deep ravines or rushing rivers below. Detective Maria Santos of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation was assigned to lead the case. A veteran investigator with 15 years of experience in missing person cases, Detective Santos had seen the devastating effects that Colorado's wilderness could have on unprepared travelers. However, something about Jonathan's disappearance struck her as unusual from the beginning. Experienced drivers familiar with mountain roads rarely simply vanished without leaving some trace of their passage. The initial search focused on the most likely route between Denver and Aspen. Search and rescue teams combed Highway 82 and the surrounding mountain roads, looking for any sign of Jonathan's Honda Accord. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras flew overhead, scanning the rocky terrain and deep valleys for any indication of an accident. The search was complicated by the vast wilderness areas surrounding the highway, where a vehicle could disappear completely if it left the road in the wrong location. For 3 weeks, the search continued with increasing desperation. Hundreds of volunteers joined professional search teams, hiking through remote areas and checking every possible location where a car might have gone off the road. Local media covered the story extensively, broadcasting Jonathan's photograph and appealing for any information from the public. Despite these massive efforts, no trace of Dr. Mitchell or his vehicle was discovered. Detective Santos expanded her investigation beyond the possibility of a simple traffic accident. She began interviewing Jonathan's family, friends, and colleagues, looking for any indication that his disappearance might have been voluntary or the result of foul play. What she discovered was a man with no apparent reason to vanish deliberately. Jonathan's marriage was stable, his career was thriving, and he had no financial problems or known enemies. However, Detective Santos did uncover some troubling information about Jonathan's final weeks. Sarah mentioned the strange phone calls her husband had been receiving at home, conversations that seemed to make him uncomfortable. When Detective Santos pressed for details, Sarah explained that Jonathan would usually take these calls in his home office, speaking in hushed tones and appearing troubled afterward. The investigation took a significant turn when Detective Santos discovered that Jonathan's cell phone had last connected to a tower near Glenwood Springs, roughly 2/3 of the way to Aspen. This information allowed investigators to narrow their search area considerably, focusing on the region around Glenwood Springs and the mountain roads leading toward Aspen. The discovery also suggested that Jonathan had made it further along his route than initially believed before something happened to prevent him from completing his journey. Detective Santos interviewed employees at gas stations, restaurants, and hotels along the route, hoping to find someone who had seen Jonathan or his Honda Accord on that Friday in July. Despite showing his photograph to dozens of potential witnesses, no one could recall seeing the missing doctor. The lack of witnesses was puzzling, given that Jonathan was traveling during peak tourist season, when the mountain roads were typically busy with vacation traffic. As the investigation continued, Detective Santos began to examine Jonathan's professional life more closely. She discovered that his cardiac research was highly valuable and had attracted interest from several pharmaceutical companies. The research focused on a revolutionary treatment protocol that could potentially generate millions of dollars in revenue for any company that could successfully develop and market it. This revelation led Detective Santos to consider the possibility that Jonathan's disappearance might be connected to corporate espionage or industrial theft. The pharmaceutical industry was notoriously competitive, and valuable research had been stolen before. She began investigating whether Jonathan might have been targeted because of his research, or if he had discovered something that made him a threat to someone else's interests. The hospital's IT department provided Detective Santos with access to Jonathan's computer system, where she made a disturbing discovery. Someone had been accessing his files and research data from remote locations during the weeks before his disappearance. The unauthorized access had been sophisticated and carefully concealed, suggesting that whoever was responsible had significant technical expertise. This finding transformed the investigation from a missing person case into a potential industrial espionage and kidnapping investigation. Detective Santos began working with federal authorities who had jurisdiction over crimes involving interstate commerce and computer intrusion. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources to the case, including advanced forensic capabilities and access to national databases. Despite the expanded investigation, months passed without any significant breakthroughs. The trail seemed to grow colder with each passing day, and the massive search efforts gradually scaled back. Jonathan's case received less media attention as other stories captured public interest, but his family never stopped hoping for answers. Sarah struggled to maintain normalcy for her daughters while dealing with the constant uncertainty about her husband's fate. The twins asked questions she couldn't answer, wondering when their father would come home and why he hadn't called them. Sarah found herself torn between maintaining hope that Jonathan was still alive somewhere and preparing for the possibility that he might never return. The first anniversary of Jonathan's disappearance passed quietly, marked only by a small memorial service at Denver General Hospital. His colleagues remembered him as a dedicated physician and researcher whose work had already begun to save lives. The hospital established a research fund in Jonathan's name, ensuring that his contributions to cardiac medicine would continue even in his absence. As years passed, the case gradually faded from public attention, though Detective Santos continued to work on it whenever new information emerged. She retired in 2010 without solving the case, but she passed all the files to Detective James Rodriguez, a younger investigator who promised to continue pursuing any new leads that might develop. The breakthrough came in an unexpected way in 2015, when a construction crew working on a highway expansion project near Glenwood Springs discovered human remains in a remote area about 10 miles from where Jonathan's cell phone had last been detected. The remains were severely decomposed after 14 years in the wilderness, but dental records eventually confirmed that they belonged to Dr. Jonathan Mitchell. The discovery of Jonathan's remains created more questions than answers. The location where his body was found was not visible from any road and would have required considerable effort to reach. More puzzling was the complete absence of his Honda Accord or any of his personal belongings. Investigators concluded that Jonathan's body had been moved to this location, strongly suggesting that his death was the result of foul play rather than an accident. Forensic examination of the remains revealed that Jonathan had suffered a severe head injury that would have been immediately fatal. However, the advanced decomposition made it impossible to determine whether the injury was caused by an accident or deliberate assault. The medical examiner estimated that the remains had been in the remote location for approximately 14 years, consistent with the timeline of Jonathan's disappearance. Detective Rodriguez reopened the investigation with renewed determination. He re-interviewed everyone connected to the original case and used advanced forensic techniques that hadn't been available in 2001 to re-examine evidence. He also began exploring new leads based on developments in the pharmaceutical industry and changes in the companies that had shown interest in Jonathan's research. The case remained frustratingly unsolved until 2017, when FBI agent Lisa Chen received the unexpected confession that would finally reveal the truth. Marcus Webb, a former computer programmer arrested in connection with an unrelated cybercrime investigation, began providing information about other crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. When he mentioned knowing what had happened to a doctor who disappeared in Colorado in 2001, Agent Chen immediately contacted Detective Rodriguez. Webb's confession revealed a conspiracy that had been hidden for 16 years. According to his detailed statement, he had been hired in 2001 by Dr. Richard Hawthorne, the chief executive officer of Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, to infiltrate Jonathan's computer system and steal his cardiac research data. The research was reportedly worth millions of dollars and could have given Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals a significant advantage in developing new heart medications. Webb explained that the computer intrusion had been successful initially, with Jonathan's research data being systematically copied and transmitted to Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals over several weeks. However, Jonathan had eventually discovered the unauthorized access to his system and had begun investigating the source of the intrusion. This development had alarmed Dr. Hawthorne, who feared that Jonathan would expose the theft and destroy his company's reputation. The most shocking revelation in Webb's confession was the description of what happened on July 15, 2001. According to Webb, Dr. Hawthorne had called Jonathan that morning and arranged to meet him along the route to Aspen, claiming to have important information about a potential research collaboration. The meeting was supposed to be brief, but it had gone disastrously wrong when Jonathan refused to remain silent about the stolen research. Webb described how Dr. Hawthorne had become increasingly desperate as his company faced financial difficulties and needed a breakthrough product to survive. The stolen research represented Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals' best hope for developing a profitable new medication. But Jonathan's integrity and ethical standards made him unwilling to overlook the theft of his life's work. During their confrontation at the remote rest area near Glenwood Springs, Jonathan had threatened to report the theft to both law enforcement and medical authorities. In a moment of panic and desperation, Dr. Hawthorne had struck Jonathan with a rock, causing the fatal head injury. Webb's confession included detailed information about how Hawthorne had disposed of both Jonathan's body and his vehicle to conceal the crime. According to Webb, Dr. Hawthorne had driven Jonathan's Honda Accord to an abandoned mine shaft in the mountains and pushed it over the edge, where it had remained hidden for 16 years. He had then moved Jonathan's body to the remote location where it was eventually discovered, hoping that if the remains were ever found, they would be attributed to a hiking accident or natural causes. Detective Rodriguez was able to verify many aspects of Webb's confession through additional investigation. Phone records confirmed that Dr. Hawthorne had called Jonathan on the morning of his disappearance. Financial records showed that Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals had made payments to Webb's computer consulting company during the relevant time period. Most importantly, investigators were able to locate the abandoned mine shaft and recover Jonathan's Honda Accord, which contained additional evidence supporting Webb's account. The revelation that Dr. Hawthorne had been responsible for Jonathan's death sent shockwaves through Colorado's medical community. Hawthorne had died of a heart attack in 2014, 3 years before Webb's confession, meaning he would never face justice for his crime. However, the truth about Jonathan's fate finally provided closure for his family and colleagues after 16 years of uncertainty. For Sarah Mitchell and her daughters, learning the truth about Jonathan's death brought a complex mixture of relief and renewed grief. After 16 years of wondering what had happened to their husband and father, they finally had answers. While the truth was painful, it confirmed what Sarah had always believed, that Jonathan would never have voluntarily abandoned his family. Emma and Sophie, now 24 years old and college graduates, struggled to process the revelation that their father had been murdered for refusing to compromise his ethical principles. They had grown up hoping that their father might still be alive somewhere, and learning about his violent death was devastating. However, they also found some comfort in knowing that he had died defending his integrity and the research that could help save other lives. The official closure of the case in 2017 marked the end of one of Colorado's longest-running missing person investigations. While Dr. Hawthorne could no longer be prosecuted for his crime, the truth about what happened provided the closure that Jonathan's family had sought for so many years. The stolen research that had cost Jonathan his life was ultimately never successfully developed, as Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals had struggled financially and was eventually sold to a larger company. Sarah Mitchell channeled her grief and anger into positive action by establishing the Jonathan Mitchell Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting ethical standards in medical research and providing resources for families of missing persons. She spoke publicly about her husband's case, emphasizing the importance of integrity in medical research and the devastating impact that corporate greed could have on innocent families. The Colorado Medical Association honored Dr. Mitchell posthumously, recognizing his contributions to cardiac research and his unwavering commitment to ethical medical practice. Denver General Hospital created a memorial garden where colleagues and patients could remember the dedicated physician who had given his life rather than compromise his principles. The garden featured a plaque with one of Jonathan's favorite quotes about the responsibility that comes with the privilege of practicing medicine. Detective Rodriguez reflected on the Jonathan Mitchell case as one of the most emotionally challenging and complex investigations of his career. The 16-year delay in solving the case highlighted both the difficulties of investigating crimes in Colorado's vast wilderness and the persistence required to achieve justice for victims and their families. He often thought about how different the outcome might have been if Webb's confession had come years earlier. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of corporate espionage in the medical field and led to increased security measures at hospitals and research institutions throughout Colorado. Medical schools began including discussions about research security and ethical decision-making in their curricula, using Jonathan's story as an example of the courage required to maintain professional integrity under pressure. For the Mitchell family, the resolution of the case marked both an ending and a beginning. While they would never fully recover from the loss of Jonathan, they found purpose in ensuring that his memory would live on through the foundation Sarah created and the lives he had saved through his medical work. The truth about his death, while painful, allowed them to finally move forward with their lives. The story of Dr. Jonathan Mitchell's kidnapping and murder serves as a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how long it takes to emerge, will eventually come to light. His commitment to ethical medical practice, even in the face of death, inspired colleagues and students to maintain the highest standards in their own work and never compromise their principles for personal gain. Sarah often reflected on the 16 years of uncertainty and how the truth had finally emerged through the most unlikely source. She chose to view Webb's confession not as a coincidence, but as evidence that justice, though delayed, would ultimately prevail. The unexpected detail that solved the case demonstrated how answers can emerge from the most unlikely sources when we least expect them. Today, the Mitchell family continues to honor Jonathan's memory through their foundation work and by sharing their story with others who face similar tragedies. They have transformed their personal loss into a force for positive change, ensuring that Dr. Jonathan Mitchell's dedication to helping others and maintaining ethical standards will continue to influence the medical profession for generations to come.